have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
A little program note at the top of the show. We just want to alert you all out there that starting next week on June 6th, for our free speech viewers, they're going into pledge mode until June 26th. Happy Pride. And during those weeks, our show will premiere on Saturdays at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. PM, and repeat on Sundays at 7 a.m. and p.m. And that's going to be it and it's going to resume normally at June 27th.
Set your DVRs accordingly.
If you're on our email list, you would get these notices.
Yeah, so go to our website at gayusatv.org and sign up for our email list.
You can sign up yourself. It's automatic now. We're so modern.
Well, not really.
But the Republican Party does not seem to want to be very modern. They used some underhanded tactics this week to stop and further limit LGBT rights.
It's a sad story in the U.S. House of Representatives. We'll see whether they get away with it. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, you've heard of him, wants an anti-LGBT Supreme Court, affirms the right of states to discriminate against LGBT people, and is meeting with the most prominent anti-LGBT leaders from the religious right in about 3 weeks.
The fight over House Bill 2 in North Carolina, the anti-gay LGBT law there, continues. Charlotte alone has already lost $285 million and 1,300 jobs due to the boycotts over the law.
Ouch. There is a big flap over how the San Diego Gay Men's Chorus was treated as they tried to sing the national anthem at a Padres baseball game.
You know, they had sodomy laws in Australia up until 1981, and in Victoria, the premier there delivered a very moving apology to those convicted under those laws.
Bolivia has approved a sweeping transgender rights law.
Desmond Tutu's daughter, who is an Anglican priest, has lost her license to practice her vocation because she married a woman.
The Obama administration has proposed cutting funding for abstinence-only education from the next year's budget. We'll see whether they get away with that.
And we're going to review the return of Kiki and Herb at Joe's Pub at the Public Theater. That was quite a night out.
Joy, joy, joy. All right, but no joy in Mudville or the capital of the United States, where the United States House of Representatives, led by the Republican Party, performed some nefarious deeds in the last week.
Well, it started out on May 19th. Well, it started out earlier than that in committees and things. But when they, in the House, full House, they approved the fiscal year 2017 defense authorization bill by a vote of 277 to 147, they included something by Steve Russell in Oklahoma seeking to allow religiously affiliated federal contractors to continue to engage in anti-LGBT discrimination.
We've been following this for the last few weeks as it was proposed in committee. The Democrats tried to kill it there. They failed. Few Republicans voted with the Democrats, but it still wasn't enough to kill this amendment to the defense bill.
Now, do you think the Senate is likely to pass it, or will they need a cloture vote that could kill it?
They could kill it, or the problem is that they get away with attaching these things to big must-pass bills,
right.
And the defense authorization bill is a prime example of that, and people are always adding strange little things to that bill. So the negotiation over that in the Senate and then between the Senate and the House is going to be dicey. And it may come down to the real question, which is, will the president veto the defense authorization bill because the Republicans have inserted this amendment that essentially overrides his executive order. He ordered anyone doing business with the federal government not to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity.
And there is a standard religious exemption for religious groups,
yes.
But not a blanket religious exemption, and not the kind that Republicans favor these days, or some Republicans, most Republicans, which is, to allow anybody with religious feelings to discriminate.
Ever since the Supreme Court said that the Hobby Lobby company, because it is owned by people who assert a religious attitude towards their corporate profitable work, could be defined as religious, now the Republicans can insert in this bill a thing that says any company, any organization, any individual doing business with the federal government, if they assert a religious objection to, say, employing LGBT people, giving equal benefits, recognizing an employee's same-sex marriage, whatever, they're allowed to get away with that and still be given public money by the federal government to do whatever they're hired to do.
So a couple of days later, out gay Representative Sean Patrick Maloney, who has come in for some criticism here, partly because he does work very closely and vote with the Republicans oftentimes.
Yeah.
He's from upstate New York. He proposed an amendment that would codify President Obama's executive order into law, essentially.
A good thing.
Yes, a very good thing, and it was headed for passage. It was getting all the votes that it needed.
Yeah.
And because it is a little easier under Paul Ryan at the moment, maybe not when you see this show, to add amendments to bills. So it's 1 or 2 votes shy of passage.
No, it had enough votes to pass. I think it had at least 217. I know it should be 218 with the numbers in the House, but I think maybe people are out.
We can't have gay rights, the Republicans say to themselves. So what are we going to do? We are going to open up the vote, not just to open it up to let some more people come down to the floor and vote, but to twist arms and make people change their votes on the floor of the House for something that they've already voted for and that they've told their constituents, I'm a Republican, but I'm for gay rights, blah, blah, blah.
And they violated the rules of the House because in a couple of ways. They're not supposed to delay the end of the vote in the way they did. They held it open for much longer than they were legally allowed to. And people who are changing their votes are supposed to come down into the well of the House to announce that they are changing their votes. But suddenly, with no one appearing, no one publicly stating their position, suddenly votes started to change on the tally sheet.
Well, through some electronic means, Steny Hoyer, who's the House Minority Whip, Democrat from Maryland. Yeah, he figured out who did the changing, and they include Representatives Jeff Denham of California, Darrell Issa of California, David Valadao of California, Mimi Walters of California, Greg Walden of Oregon, and Bruce Poliquin of Maine, and David Young of Iowa. They're the ones who switched sides. And now a lot of Democrats, in some of these cases, where some of these people are vulnerable, are ready to go in and knock them off. Well,
the stunning thing as this was taking place was people didn't know immediately who was changing the votes, but they could see on the electronic board that votes were changing, and they knew that the vote had been stopped illegally, and they stood there and watched these votes change, the numbers change, and the Democrats started screaming at the Republicans and shouting, shame, shame, shame. I felt like I was at an ACT UP demonstration watching it. But it was a beautiful thing to see that they were rebelling and angry and showing that and not just letting it be business as usual.
When the House violates its own rules, is there any recourse legally to say that this is an invalid procedure?
I've called it illegal. You're right that it is a violation of their rules. It's not it's not in the Constitution. But you know, the people who would adjudicate that are the Republicans who are in charge. Right. So, no, there's not going to be
There's no outside recourse.
No.
All right. So then, on May 23rd...
so the point there is, defense authorization bill currently includes, passed by the House, an anti-LGBT amendment that lets everybody announce a religious objection to treating us equally as if they're federal contractors. The military construction and veterans appropriation bill failed to include a pro-LGBT amendment.
And then, now the Republicans seem to be having a little, somewhat remorse about this.
I don't think it's remorse. I think it's fear.
Well,
because they got screamed at, shame, 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 and it got publicized all over the place.
That's how the world operates.
Yeah, and they've already got what they want anyway, because they killed the good amendment and they preserved the bad amendment.
But into another bill on the Veterans Administration, the bigots slipped some language in to allow private doctors and other medical providers to sign contracts with the VA, even if they offered no protection against discrimination for LGBT people. And it would have also overridden an executive order by the president in 2014. So the leadership actually stripped that out of the bill because they didn't want another blow up over this. And then...
They've gotten enough.
But then the overall bill was removed from consideration because some veterans groups objected to it. That's maybe more information than you want to know. But now...
Well, it means that the bad stuff may come back.
Right. And now Paul Ryan wants, he's the speaker, to change, or maybe the next president, to change the rules to make them less open to deflect such amendments from both the right and the left.
Well, he wants to shut down freedom on the floor of the House. He doesn't want people to be able to suddenly think up a proposal and put it to a vote. He says you have to announce it beforehand, you have to get it written up, it has to, you know, people have to have a chance to look at it. All of which sounds good, but in fact this is a ploy to stop anything like what Sean Patrick Maloney did try to do, and Sean's going to try to do it again, which is good.
He has promised to go back and do it again, and he has built up relationships with some of these remaining moderate Republicans on some other issues, so maybe he can make it happen, maybe he can't. But you know, in the Senate, it does seem to be easier to offer amendments. I mean, Jesse Helms used to do it all the time to great effect.
Yeah, I don't know what the current rules are. But as long as we're at the Capitol of the United States, shall we talk about Mr. Trump before we get to all the North Carolina and
yes, he
transgender stuff?
Now, again, well, this is partly transgender stuff. You know, Trump got a sort of a headline saying he wants to protect transgenders. Not true.
No.
He doesn't want to protect transgenders. He says that at first. Well, I think we have to help the people. But then he says,
all of them.
I don't view it as civil rights or not civil rights. I know it's kind of pointless to parse anything that he says. But then he says, but we have to help people. And hopefully the states will make the right decisions, because he says this is a states' rights issue. If they want to, that's the headline. If they want to discriminate, they can discriminate.
You know what? People don't talk enough about Trump these days. They sit on TV and they say, why is he doing this? And do you think he'll do this? And can he do this? He's a novice. He doesn't understand any of this going into this race. He's been at it for a year. He's been blustering along. People say, well, why is he going to keep doing it that way? Why isn't he moderating himself? He's a novice. He doesn't understand the game. He doesn't understand the conventional language. And people are slowly teaching him this. And what they have taught him this week is states' rights. That is his new phrase, states' rights. That's what he's in favor of.
Strom Thurmond's phrase and George Wallace's phrase.
Exactly, and that's who he's learning from, is the sons of those people.
It was our phrase when we started winning marriage by state. But
Not really.
Right after we taped last week, he announced his list of who he wants for the Supreme Court, and they're all far-right people, right?
Yes. Yes, with a little twist here and there.
Well, but one of them is William Pryor, who Lambda called one of the most anti-gay nominees for federal court in history. He compared in 2003 homosexual sodomy, because it was the Texas sodomy law, to polygamy, incest, pedophilia, prostitution, and adultery. And there is no fundamental right to engage in homosexual sodomy just because it happens behind closed doors.
That was his brief in the Lawrence v. Texas case that ended up on our side.
You know, whenever you get a right-winger on television, and I only saw, actually Andrew Sullivan did this to one of the, Tony Perkins or one of these guys from the Family Research Council. Do you want to go back to the days when it is legal to come into my bedroom and arrest me for making love?
Yes.
And they say yes.
Yes.
And so get them to say that. And, well...
There are a lot of people who agree with them, as we are finding out this year. Now, I will tell you one little strange asterisk on Pryor, this judge who is extremely right-wing and wrote that brief. He also ruled in a case that gender identity discrimination is sex discrimination.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Let's get him on the court.
Well, I'm not saying that, but I just want to be fair.
You know, I don't know if I want to be around to report on all that kind of stuff when the time comes.
I don't know if I want to be around in 3 weeks for Donald Trump's meeting with every last evangelical right-winger. They are all getting together to further his education on all these issues. It is going to be hideous.
It was organized by Ben Carson. And the people who are so far coming are Tony Perkins, James Dobson, I'm just reading the ones that I know. Ken Cuccinelli, who was the far-right Attorney General of Virginia, E.W. Jackson, Harry Jackson, Ralph Reed, Pat Robertson, who was not even really compos mentis at this point, but still at it. And it's all the worst groups, all the hate groups that you can imagine, and he's sitting down with them. We have to protest.
All day.
We have to protest this.
All day long.
Where's Queer Nation when you need them?
Well, give us a chance. Tell us where the meeting
June
is.
June 21st. We don't know where the meeting is yet, but we'll find out.
And we'll let you know, because if it's where you are, you might want to show up and object, although not throw rocks like they did in Albuquerque.
We are nonviolent, but that's a debate. Harvey Firestein posted on Facebook, don't pay any attention to Trump, you're just giving him more power. But I do think we have to demonstrate with some moral force, not rocks, that this is unacceptable. This is an unacceptable circumstance. I mean, shouldn't people be going to the Republican convention to demonstrate?
Look, I'm just happy at the moment that the Democrats are starting to call him on his stuff and point out what he has said and done over his career and go after him directly and not be scared of him like the other Republican candidates were.
Okay.
All right, moving on to North Carolina.
Well, let me just finish up with a couple of political notes. One is the Libertarian Party. We told you about a gay candidate for vice president there last week. While now running is Governor Bill Weld, the former governor of Massachusetts, who was very pro-gay as governor. But when he moved to New York to try to run for governor of New York, he said, I'm not for same-sex marriage outside of Massachusetts, because it's just based on the state constitution. But then he changed his mind again, and he wrote an amicus brief in 2013 for it. But he sometimes calls Karl Rove a friend, so I don't know. Anyway, libertarians, they could be a factor this year.
He's bigfooting the gay candidate is the point.
And then in Austin, Texas, you read about the State Board of Education candidate that we were telling you about, famous for claiming that President Obama might have been a gay prostitute in his youth.
Who knows? People are talking about it, right?
He lost the Republican nomination narrowly.
Shocking.
Why? Very narrowly. Why? That even one of the Tea Party groups pulled out on her at the last minute. She was too much for them. So Donald Trump, just to let you know,
there are limits.
There are crazy things that you say that can hurt you in elections.
We'll get back to local politics after this, but let's bring you up to date on what's happening in North Carolina.
Sure.
Well, there has been this proposal for a compromise. What the right wing is saying is, Charlotte, North Carolina, if you repeal your pro-LGBT law, then we'll go to the state legislature and we'll have them pass something new that says you can pass laws like that, but the people have to vote on it. You can't just do it as the city council or whatever.
But this is the Chamber of Commerce who don't support gay rights in the first place.
And it is the Chamber of Commerce and others who are proposing this. Charlotte, to its everlasting credit, is saying, sorry, we're not buying that little bait and switch. We are not going to repeal our law. We have every right to pass our law. And just because you've overridden it with your HB2 doesn't mean that we're not going to stand up for the rights of LGBT people and our city.
The city has already lost. The city of Charlotte has already lost. And they're the good guys. They've already lost $285 million in revenue and 1,300 jobs over this law. But you're not going to get it back by, repealing a gay rights law. The whole state needs to. And that's the thing. I keep seeing, Human Rights Campaign praises Georgia for getting the Super Bowl because they vetoed an anti-gay bill, but Georgia doesn't have a pro-gay bill.
No, but
I'm not even talking about pro-gay. You don't have to be pro. Just be fair to us.
In the relative state of things, that's better than North Carolina. And the San Francisco 49ers, as long as you're talking about football, have donated $75,000 to Equality North Carolina and have blasted HB2.
And 200 athletes who were registered to participate in Ironman in Raleigh and Wilmington, North Carolina, pulled out and are going to go to other venues.
Well, the Ironman organization said, we're still going to hold the competition in North Carolina, but we recognize that people may not want to compete there, and so we will happily transfer you to another competition in another state if you would like, and so far 200 have taken advantage of that. Maroon 5 is the latest musical group to pull out. They've canceled a couple of concerts in North Carolina.
Well, American Airlines has been very stand-up about this, and they have a big base there in North Carolina, but they're now afraid of political retribution from the state. The state gives them a break on taxes on fuel, which is substantial, and they are worried that they're going to lose that. But they have extended their contract. Well, they extended their contract on March 10th for 10 years in Charlotte. So we'll see how they hold up under the pressure.
You remember that last week Megyn Kelly interviewed Trump and a few other people?
I didn't watch it. I heard she was soft on him.
She was, but here's the new piece of news. One of the people she interviewed was Laverne Cox. So she's talking to Laverne basically about Orange is the New Black and her life and all that stuff. Well, it turns out that Laverne Cox in that interview talked a lot about North Carolina and HB2. All cut out of the interview.
Oh,
None of that
brave Megyn Kelly, that paragon of journalism.
Exactly.
Well, here's basically a right-winger who is having none of it, and that's David Gergen.
Yes.
He was at Elon, E-L-O-N,
yes.
University. He was the commencement speaker.
He's a graduate of Elon.
And North Carolina is his home state, and he told a crowd of 12,000 at commencement, the forces of political extremism have asserted themselves in North Carolina, damaging the state's reputation and putting the citizens at risk. So, Gergen was a conservative. He worked for Reagan, he worked for Bush, and then he worked for Bill Clinton when Bill pulled him in to try to get some balance in his administration.
You're right to say he's a North Carolina native. I should double check whether he's an actual Elon graduate, but he is from North Carolina. Other related news, skipping down a few headlines. In Chicago, they're proposing an ordinance that would strengthen access by transgender people to bathrooms that they consider appropriate.
And they're being sued. Back to North Carolina, the Republican U.S. Senator from there, Richard Burr, said that Republican lawmakers in the state went too far with this thing. And I got issues with it, he said. The legislature botched what they were trying to do. It was far too expansive. Thank goodness for these voices. I hope that we get more of them as the year goes on.
We told you last week that the Mississippi Department of Education was standing up to the politicians in Mississippi and supporting the federal guidelines that had been issued by the Obama administration about how to respect transgender students.
Never mind.
Yeah, the politicians came down heavy on them, and the Department of Education changed its mind. Now, these guidelines are very controversial in a lot of states. Tennessee, Fayette County has just voted to defy the guidelines. Now, here's the deal. These are guidelines. They're not rules. The federal government has said if you don't go along with this, we will take a look at your federal funding, but no one has...
Oh, that's not a threat.
Well, it's certainly a little dig, but no one has filed suit. No one has ordered that these guidelines be followed. They put them out as best practices, as this is what we think you should do, and we'll take a look if you don't. But these states are just rising up in rebellion to say, how dare you? Look, the Texas Attorney General is going to sue the federal government about these guidelines. How do you sue the federal government when they have not told you that you have to have these guidelines? What's the basis of the lawsuit?
Everything's bigger in Texas.
Yeah.
But wonder of wonders, in Oklahoma, they killed their anti-transgender youth bill, which would have segregated restaurants. It's not going to move forward in this session.
Well, that was a tricky little deal, too, because they first told the gay rights group in Oklahoma, the bill will not move forward, we're killing it, it's all over. And then, that night, they brought it up for a vote in committee in the legislature, and the committee vote was tied 10-10, so under that circumstance, it can't move forward currently, but people are worried that they're going to revive it again.
Well, back to neighboring Texas, a detention facility for immigrants is set to open there that will be have a special unit for transgender people. Now, this is going to be in Alvarado, Texas, southwest of Dallas. It's only 36 beds, and a lot of unsafety for transgender folks in these facilities and in prisons in general. The only other such space is in Santa Ana, California, and they're talking about closing that one.
Yeah. And, people want to kill these detention facilities altogether. The government is not talking about doing that. They're talking about transferring people. Also, by the way, Oklahoma has declared a transgender state of emergency.
God.
Talk about trans panic.
Well, we do need to patiently explain these things, and I have conversations even with friends of mine who are either gay or very pro-gay, and they want to understand what goes on. But when you start talking about the fact, well, we shouldn't have to do this, but on this show, but there's separate stalls for everybody. Everybody can have privacy in locker rooms if they want privacy, and if they don't care about it, they don't care about it. That kind of stuff. But people are just crazy about this right now.
And it's also this business of how you define people, and the fact that the right wing refuses to see trans women as women and keeps referring to them as men, and vice versa. So that becomes a big problem. But maybe we'll be saved by Ted Olson again.
Yeah.
The Department of Justice has filed suit against the North Carolina HB2 law. The Human Rights Campaign has hired Ted Olson to file an amicus brief on behalf of corporations who are also opposed to the HB2 law in that lawsuit.
The Grayson County, Virginia School Board passed an anti-transgender policy that forces transgender students to use the wrong restrooms. Now, at the University of Tennessee, they are having to disband their Office of Diversity after it was defunded under a new state law that prevents the institution from using state funds to promote the use of gender-neutral pronouns, to promote or inhibit the celebration of religious holidays, or to fund or support sex work.
And this is because the staff put out a memo, or the Office of Diversity put out a memo to staff suggesting that people ask students what their preferred names and gender identification are. Defunded.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty harsh. In Indiana, good news. The Valparaiso City Council, by a vote of 5-2, has passed a non-discrimination law covering sexual orientation and gender identity and expression.
Making a lot of progress in cities in Indiana after the debacle last year.
Yes, and let's see what else I got here. All right, well,
Well, also on the transgender thing, in Washington, D.C., a security guard who kicked a transgender woman out of the women's restroom at a Giant Food has been charged with assault. I hope so. The police...
As a hate crime.
Yes.
The new Trans United Fund, the new political group, sent a questionnaire to the major presidential candidates, 11-page questionnaire on trans issues. Bernie Sanders has returned his with answers that they consider good. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have not returned their questionnaires, and a spokesman for the Clinton campaign says they're not going to. They first said that they welcome the opportunity to answer the questionnaire. If you look on Hillary's website, you see a lot of support of trans people and trans issues, but they're not filling out the 11-page questionnaire.
She gave a greeting to the HIV criminalization conference as well.
Yeah.
This week. All right, some crime stories maybe?
Okay.
Well, a horrible story out of Salt Lake City. A gay leader there and a restaurateur who developed the downtown dining scene, John Williams, 72, we have a picture of him, was murdered in his home, set afire by his ex-husband, Craig Crawford, who was on again, off again in terms of living there. He'd been trying to get a restraining order against Crawford, but had been denied. He could be heard screaming from the top floors of the place.
Terrible.
He was very close to the mayor, the out lesbian Jackie Biskupski there, and was, you know, really considered the guy who developed downtown.
Yeah, terrible story. In Hawaii, a little good news. The lesbian couple arrested for kissing in a Honolulu grocery store.
There they are.
They were held in jail for 3 days. Held in jail for 3 days.
Kissing.
Kissing in a grocery store.
The charges were later dropped.
They have received a settlement of $80,000. Okay.
Yes, and the store gave them a $10,000 settlement.
All right. In Park Slope, Brooklyn, last Friday, a trans woman was gay bashed and beaten severely by 2 men at 11 o'clock in the morning.
Well, let's stay in Brooklyn. We told you about a story of a Brooklyn gay guy. He was having a pride party at his house, Jabbar Campbell, 3 years ago. And so the police came, and there was like a noise complaint, and then they came back, and da-da-da-da-da. And what they ended up doing was brutally beating him, shouting anti-gay slurs and things like this. And they tried to trash his reputation, and now the cops are being found not to have stories that they can keep straight on the thing, so they are going to be sued. He's out. Charges against him were dropped.
Interesting incident in San Diego over the weekend. The Gay Men's Chorus, about 100 members, had been invited to sing the national anthem at the San Diego Padres LA Dodgers baseball game. The Padres have been gay-friendly, had gay nights, done good things in the community, although they did ask the 100 members of the chorus to buy tickets to the game.
Oh, man.
To be able to sing the national anthem.
Grief.
Buy tickets to the game. So anyway, the chorus shows up. They're all standing in the outfield. They're ready to sing. Now, they have a pre-recorded track that they're supposed to sing to amplify the sound. They're supposed to sing, but they're supposed to have also the pre-recorded track.
So the DJ,
in the booth,
his name is Artform. That's his
DJ
name.
Artform, just newly hired. This is his dream job, to work for the Padres and do music in the booth at the Padres game.
He pushes the wrong button, and a woman's voice comes on singing the national anthem, some other recording. Now,
he had neglected to preload the Gay Men's Chorus track, so he panicked and hit a button of something that said national anthem, and this woman's voice comes out.
And that's bad, and there was somebody else there who should have stopped it and didn't stop it, but the worst part of it was, the men are all standing there while this woman is singing, and as they're marching off the field, "You sing like a girl!" And it's this catcalling from the fans, homophobic stuff, sexist stuff, and that's what happens. So they're pretty upset. They want the guy fired. Then they found out that he made a mistake. We want him reinstated. He was fired. and we want them reinstated.
Did you watch any of the video of this?
Yes.
It's all as they're coming off the field. Some of it is sort of joking and laughing. I think there were catcalls too, but some of it was supportive, like you know, oh, it's okay, you know, sorry, you got screwed over.
When are they having them back to sing the national
exactly.
anthem?
And will they have to buy tickets to the game to do it?
They should be paid.
That's
to
the
sing.
worst sin. Is
That's a tough song, the national anthem.
Oh my God! But the chorus has been very good about it and has been generous about saying, you know, bring the guy back.
What's happening to those Methodists?
Oh my God!
Well, they're trying to stave off a...
Oh, by the way, Major League Baseball is going to investigate this incident.
Okay. So they're trying to stave off a schism in the Methodists, and it's basically began because it's a worldwide church. It's a hierarchical church. It's not all the way there on the gay stuff. The question is whether they're going to accept LGBT clergy and allow same-sex marriage as the Episcopalians do, but not other parts of Anglicanism. So anyway,
We should ask Hillary. She's a Methodist.
Oh.
She talks about growing up in the Methodist church and how important it is to her.
So they're basically kicking the can down the road. Some people have written me and said, well, this is progress, that they're even going to talk about it, but they're not. They avoided settling it this year.
They told the Council of Bishops to appoint a commission to study these the choices for the denomination. But what's interesting to me is all of this is to appease the right wing. They don't want to appease the left wing. They always want to appease the right wing because the right wing are the ones who are threatening to leave.
And they are talking about splitting the church up. And
yes.
It kind of makes sense at this point.
Maybe even 3 parts.
You know, when I go through these stories about things that are going on in this country, I think maybe it's time for a divorce for us as well.
Are we going to go back to the Civil War and just
what do you mean go back
out?
to the Civil War? It never ended.
Well, that's
not a joke.
That's true. Very
all
true.
these things, you can trace these things throughout history. It happened, you know, if you watch All the Way, the LBJ thing on HBO with Bryan Cranston, you'll see it play out over the Civil Rights Act and how it's playing out over gay rights, then it's transgender rights.
It's very scary right now.
People don't give up. Can't we all get along?
Evidently not. So at the Methodist conference, there were LGBT and LGBT ally protesters as this discussion was going on. And they evidently put rainbow duct tape on their mouths. And I want to see that rainbow duct tape.
All right.
It could be very useful.
But in some places, they are upholding standards like Trinity Christian Academy in Wichita, Kansas. Both parents and students must sign a form acknowledging, among other things, that they understand they can be expelled if they have an LGBT family member in the home. In the home. In the home.
It's like cooties.
Not for...
You know, your association. You're out.
And then tell us about what happened in Kentucky with the Archdiocese.
Louisville, Kentucky, St. Michael's Catholic Cemetery has rejected a headstone design for 2 guys who are married.
There it is.
See, it says Burke and De Leon, or however they pronounce it.
Either way.
Now, these guys were plaintiffs in the Supreme Court marriage case, the Obergefell case. And they're big local heroes in Louisville.
So they want a picture of the Supreme Court on their tombstone.
And a picture of, between their names at the top, you can't see it too clearly, but those are intertwined wedding rings. So the church said, we will do the headstone for you, but no rings and no picture of the Supreme Court of the United States.
What are they worried about up there?
On other headstones for non-homosexual married gentlemen, they have allowed pictures of wedding rings, golf symbols, references to the University of Kentucky, and Churchill Downs. But no Supreme Court of the United States on this headstone.
I wanted to set up a putting green on my father's grave because he was a big golfer. But
because that's the only reason you would visit it?
Well, I wave at him from the highway. I love my daddy, but
Yes, you do.
I'm not so much into cemetery visits.
No.
Although I like to go to foreign cemeteries, it's sort of fun.
Other political news. In Montana, there's a candidate for the U.S. House who we've mentioned before, Denise Juneau. And we've mentioned her. She's the former superintendent of schools in Montana, very highly regarded, Native American, running for the U.S. House. And we've mentioned her as maybe a lesbiterian.
Maybe? She is now, I guess.
She's out. She introduced her female partner at a big Bozeman fundraiser. Yeah. Everybody's giving her a lot of praise for being forthright and stepping forward.
Yeah, see, people like that.
Absolutely. Honesty, transparency.
What could Hillary come out about that would boost her campaign?
That's a discussion for another show.
Yes. All right.
Yale University is expanding the number of gender-neutral bathrooms it has in the wake of all this stuff happening elsewhere.
We told you about that gay bashing in Philadelphia down at the Center City, and the survivors of that attack are suing the people who were convicted of it. They say it's more about the pain and the suffering and the permanent injuries done to them, including the scarring of one of their faces.
In Alabama, we believe that Roy Moore may run for governor in 2018, and now it looks like he may have as an opponent Ambrosia Starling, the, what should we call her, drag performer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we always tell you in the polls about same-sex marriage that older people are problematic. Well, the Gallup poll finally found that 53% of Americans over 65 now support same-sex marriage. Overall, 61% support it. You know, once it gets going and people see that the sky doesn't fall, they come around.
Yes, and here's another thing about statistics. There's been much debate over many years about how and whether to count the LGBT population of the U.S. and the world. And great debate about that. Can you do it? Should you do it? What's the deal? Well, it turns out that the Office of Management and Budget of the United States government has convened 21 agencies in discussions of how to measure the LGBT population of the United States.
Are they going to watch our pupils dilate or something? I mean, because it's tough, because it's all self-report.
It is self-report, and not everyone
unless
knows.
you use Grindr, and then they'll find out about you. More about which later.
Yeah. No, there's a difficulty in people knowing what their feelings are. Do you measure feelings or actions?
Why don't they just base it on Facebook? Because they can always tell who's gay from Facebook.
Or they can start from the premise that everybody is a little bit gay.
Well, Peter Tatchell says bisexual is the big thing now. You know, then more and more people are identifying as bisexual.
Great. Because we think that's 80% of the population.
Did we do this thing about Florida, the Florida Department of Health now printing birth certificates?
Yes, we did it last week.
We did that last week.
And in New York State, State Senator Brad Hoylman is proposing that more state contracts be given to LGBT small businesses. Sounds like a good idea.
He's also trying to extend the statute of limitations on sexual abuse when you're a kid.
Yes.
And that is going nowhere because the right-wing religious groups do not want it to pass.
Yeah.
It costs them a lot of money.
All right. International news?
Well, my story of the week was, and we can't bring you this video because it was on a network news report, but the premier of Victoria, Australia, 35 years after homosexuality was decriminalized in Victoria, publicly apologized during the session of the Parliament there for.
We have a picture of him.
Yeah, we have
with
a picture
his,
of him in Parliament.
Cohorts here.
The law was repealed. The law was repealed in 1981. We only got rid of it in New York in 1980, and it was for having sex with partners. Men could be sentenced up to 15 years in prison, this shocked me. 2 decades before that, those charged under the statute faced the death penalty. I don't think they got it, but they still had it on the books in those days. So he gave this heartfelt thing. He said, it's never too late to put things right. We're sorry, this ruined lives. It was written in our name, and we in this chamber have to apologize for it.
Well, there's some of that going on these days. And if you want the link to that speech, sign up for our newsletter. It'll be in there.
I'm 62. I have friends my age in New York who were prosecuted under this law.
Yeah.
My age.
Not in Australia.
No, here in New York.
Well, it was in force longer here. What should we say? In South Korea, a court has rejected recognition of the marriage of two men. The court said the legislature needs to do something about this, not the court. There is no constitutional right to this. The legislature has to act.
But same-sex marriages have gotten underway in Colombia.
Yes. Very
And
good.
in
the Church of Scotland has okayed marriage for gay clergy. You can hire a married gay clergy member in Scotland, but the church will still not perform weddings for same-sex couples.
You can't do it. Now, in Mexico, 65% of Mexicans approve of marriage between persons of the same sex at the national level. But that bill that the president said he was going to do about same-sex marriage nationwide, they're not going to take it up. They're not even going to talk about what they're going to do about it until September.
In Tbilisi, Georgia, they had a big meeting.
Georgia, the country.
Yes. We're in international news now.
Yep.
The World Congress of Families, a heinous right-wing organization that has spread homophobia around the world, held a big conference. 10 LGBT activists were arrested for writing graffiti on the Orthodox Patriarch's office fence after they were denied a protest permit to protest outside this conference. Their graffiti said, "All love is equal," so of course that meant they were arrested. But guess who wrote a note to the World Congress of Families congratulating them on this conference? George W. Bush.
God.
George W. Bush. Great humanitarian.
Unbelievable.
Really.
Unbelievable.
Sad.
Well, and a sad story out of South Africa where Desmond Tutu's daughter has been forced to give up her duties as a priest in the South African Anglican Church, which her father was, of course, the Archbishop. That's a picture of her and the wife. And she gave a great quote in this story. She said that, ironically, coming from a past where difference was the instrument of division in the country over apartheid, it is our sameness that is now the cause of distress.
Luckily, she's living in Virginia, so she can...
The wife's from Amsterdam.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
As you started to say, Bolivia, the vice president, because the president was out of town, signed it's actually a limited trans rights bill. You can change your gender, but only if you're an adult and you have a doctor's note and you're not married. But there is progress.
And in Bermuda, they're going to have a referendum on civil unions, just civil unions, on June 23rd. And
isn't that where they're going to vote yes or no on civil unions and yes or no on marriage?
I'm not sure.
The premier announced he's voting for civil unions.
He said, "Be on the right side of history." When they vote on the referendum. He says, I intend to vote yes for civil unions.
But you also have the option of voting on marriage.
Okay, great.
So,
I'm always glad I watch this show.
He's not voting for marriage, that premier.
And it's also the day that Britain's going to vote whether or not to leave the European Union.
Well, in Italy, the president has signed the civil unions bill, but the right wing now wants to have a referendum to repeal civil unions already before they even get underway.
The Seychelles have decriminalized gay sex.
Hallelujah.
This is an Indian Ocean archipelago.
In the Dominican Republic.
That's part of the African Union, so that's important.
Yes, very important. I don't mean to step on that.
Yeah.
In the Dominican Republic, our out gay ambassador, Wally Brewster, lit up the U.S. Embassy with rainbow lights in celebration of the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia.
It's not a very pretty building, but it looks prettier now. In Romania, they have collected 3 million signatures on petitions to block same-sex unions.
In Uganda, there was a break-in by 4 people at a human rights organization that is pro-LGBT. A security guard was killed. They stole a lot of information. That seemed to be the goal, and they wrecked the cameras that recorded them. But they have some images of these people who broke in. So.
And in Pakistan, a transgender activist there was shot and allegedly deprived of hospital treatment and died of her wounds. Her name was Alicia. She was shot 8 times in Peshawar on Sunday night. An altercation between a group of men and several transgender people, and she was ignored by the doctors when she got there, and she is dead. Awful.
So you noted appropriately the importance of the decriminalization of sodomy in the Seychelles. In Antigua, the Minister of Social Transformation is going to recommend the decriminalization of buggery there.
And we've told you that a lot of anti-LGBT governments are finding people on Grindr, and you can disable the location part of it. I don't know how all that works, but some Japanese researcher says, well, you can still tell where you are based on who you're talking to, because they're supposed to be near you and they can still find you. So watch out for that. It's really a problem in these countries.
The new president of Taiwan was inaugurated. The woman who is considered pro-LGBT has made some statements about support of same-sex marriage. But her statements in her inauguration speech were a little more vague, so there's some disgruntlement among activists there. On the other hand, China is accusing her of being unnatural for being a single woman.
Well, celebrities are waffling about the Beverly Hills Hotel Polo Lounge. They all started boycotting it a couple of years ago because the Sultan of Brunei owns it, and they are installing Sharia law there, which calls for the death of gay people. And so who's coming back? Megan Ellison, Miley Cyrus, Dita Von Teese, Taylor Swift, Calvin Klein, Kevin Spacey, Lorne Michaels, Russell Crowe, Leo DiCaprio. So, you know, people are going. It was empty for a while.
There must be someplace else they could go.
Yeah, please. And in England and Wales, this is quite remarkable. The number of people who say they have no religion has gone from 25% in the 2011 census to 48.5%. It's more than Christians now who say they have no religion.
That seems like a huge change in a couple of years.
It does.
I would have to question that number.
Something must have happened.
I would question that number,
Right.
but I remain open to being educated.
I didn't just get this off the internet, like some things.
Yes,
it was in The Guardian. Well, The Guardian is a responsible.
You read The Guardian on the internet.
I did. I don't. I read the paper when I'm over there, though.
Yeah. In Moldova, they held the first Pride March a few years ago.
We have B-roll there. There it is.
No, a few years ago they held the first Pride March. Can we take the audio down a little on that? Down on the audio. So this year they held the first LGBT March of Solidarity. 300 to 400 people marched for 15 minutes, 5 blocks. These are the cops who had to protect them. Here we're starting to see some of the Christians who were giving them a hard time. There was some conflict. There wasn't any report of, deaths or anything. But it was a confrontation between the Christians and the LGBT activists.
Very conservative country. I had a niece who worked in the Peace Corps there. She had a tattoo on her ankle. She had to hide it the whole time she was there because they're not allowed to do things like that. All right.
AIDS news.
Well, the Obama administration did cut $10 million from the 2017 budget.
Wait, I'm still hearing Moldova. Can we cut that audio?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, the Obama administration cut the money for abstinence only, which is a fraud.
Abstinence only, not cutting the funding.
Yes, they've spent $2 billion on it. It's a total waste of money. Now, of course, I imagine that the Republicans are going to do everything they can to restore this funding.
Well, the fights will continue in Congress. This is still a battle royal on all these things. But the HIV is Not a Crime conference did take place in Birmingham, Alabama, and Hillary Clinton provided a 2-minute video to open the conference where she, I was particularly struck by her commitment to decriminalizing people with HIV and reducing stigma. I think those are the important points in this context. And her speech was a little stiff, as we are accustomed to, and a little boilerplate. But when she got into the decriminalization and the stigma, it was important.
No, it's a controversial issue in some quarters, but it's got to be done. And I'm glad they're getting the candidates on the record about it.
Yeah. All right, entertainment news. Whoopi Goldberg is helping You're startled because I don't always approve of things she does on The View, but she announced that she is co-producing a new show this fall on Oxygen called Strut. And it is a reality show with transgender models. And this was a big surprise to the ladies of The View when she announced this. Really? There are transgender models?
Oh, come on. For
I think I first heard of that 50 years ago or something.
You know, that's the thing about the whole transgender thing is that, it's been it was on the front page of the Daily News in the 50s.
I suspect it was around in olden days
in
Egypt
it was always
and
around,
Greece.
always around. But I'm just saying, in terms of modern times.
Well, this is going to be on Oxygen in the fall, called Strut. So.
But when you go to see Kiki and Herb, you get the modern era. You get some stuff going on with the Duke and Duchess of Windsor.
Oh my God.
Hitler, everybody. It's quite a. These
Eastern Europe.
The word edgy was invented for them.
Well, this is Justin Vivian Bond and
who's transgender.
Yeah, and her and Ken Melman,
who plays the piano.
Yeah, we have a picture of them, I think. And many years ago, it was more of a stretch for them to play an aging lounge act. Now,
ladies and gentlemen,
less of a stretch. But there is Justin as Kiki and Ken at the piano as Herb. And they're just outrageous. And it's so, they supposedly closed down the act years ago. I saw the farewell performance at Carnegie Hall. But now they're back after about 8 years. And
Kiki did the Hillary soliloquy. Try saying that 3 times fast. And that was epic.
Fantastic. The whole thing was epic. Hillary, the Middle East, she went through the whole Middle East. She went through Eastern Europe. It was incredible.
You get a little nervous listening to this stuff and laughing at some of this stuff, especially if you're like us.
But we
did have a good time.
And we had celebrities sitting right in front of us.
Susan Sarandon, Michael C. Hall.
Oh, we felt very special.
Yeah.
But
thanks for suggesting it, Ann.
Oh, I would happily see Kiki and Herb once a week.
Okay.
I think they may be sold out at Joe's Pub, but who knows where they'll pop up next. Keep your eyes open for Kiki and Herb, and you can probably catch them online.
Maybe they'd like to take the show over.
Oh, that would be too good to be true. Please come take this show over.
We'll need a piano.
And then I watched the Billboard Awards, just for contrast. But the big thing there was Demi Lovato.
Well, we're there. She is. The picture's up. We're rolling credits, though. Yes.
Okay.
She's wearing the gender-neutral bathroom T-shirt.
Yep. Thank you, Demi. That was good. We'll come back with the reviews that we skipped.
Oh, sorry.
Next week.
Okay.
Well, we missed a couple of things because we ran out of time.
All right. Well, nice
enjoy Fleet Week. The sailors are in town.
Thanks for being with us.
See you next week.
Bye.